As I stepped through the revolving doors of the modern courthouse on a crisp autumn morning, an unmistakable sense of history and purpose permeated the air. My name is Alexander Monroe, and I have been reporting on the judicial process for over 2 decades. Today, I found myself at the epicenter of a case that promised to rigorously test not only the limits of our legal system, but also the fundamental principles of fairness and equality that it proclaims to uphold. The case in question involves serious criminal charges against a white defendant, Richard Emerson, and presiding over the trial was Judge Marcus Washington, an African-American jurist renowned for his unwavering commitment to justice, a legacy of integrity that challenges stereotypes and fosters trust among diverse communities. The case, charged with multiple counts of homicide and aggravated assault, had been under intense media scrutiny from the moment of the arrest. The defendant, Richard Emerson, a middle-aged white man, was accused of orchestrating a violent sequence of events that left a community reeling in its wake. The victim, a young professional with a promising future, had become yet another casualty in a string of crimes that had undermined public confidence in the system's capacity to protect its citizens. Accusations and counterclaims swirled around the case like dark clouds overhead, and every step of the process was being scrutinized with bated breath by both supporters of law enforcement and critics questioning the fairness of a system long marred by historical biases. From the outset, Judge Washington's demeanor in the courtroom was one of calm authority and measured precision. His reputation for impartiality was well known, and it was precisely this trait that many believed would shine a light on the truth during a trial so heavily burdened by public opinion. I took my seat among a carefully composed audience: legal professionals, family members of those involved in the case, and a group of local journalists whose pens were as poised as daggers at the ready. As the gavel struck, echoing off the marbled walls, the proceedings began with an atmosphere that mixed solemnity with a palpable yearning for justice. The trial commenced with opening statements from both the prosecution and defense. The lead prosecutor, Ms. Evelyn Carter, a seasoned attorney with decades of experience in criminal law, meticulously laid out the evidence against Richard Emerson. With a voice resonating with clarity and conviction, she detailed the timeline of events, the forensic evidence collected from the crime scene, and the testimonies of key witnesses. Her presentation was legally precise yet accessibly framed, ensuring that even those with minimal legal background could follow the narrative with clarity. She underscored the gravity of the charges, firmly stating that the murder of an innocent person could not be justified by any motive, whether personal or politically charged. In stark contrast, the defense attorney, Mr. Harold Kingsley, took a more measured approach in his opening statement. Although he acknowledged the severe nature of the charges, he suggested that there were inconsistencies in the evidence and gaps in the investigation that required further scrutiny. Mr. Kingsley's rhetoric was deliberate and respectful. He sought to remind the jury, and indeed the larger public, that every citizen was entitled to a fair trial, even someone accused of a heinous crime. Judge Washington listened intently throughout these preliminary remarks. His occasional interjections for clarity, though rare, served as gentle reinforcements to the legal process. "Let us ensure that both sides are given the opportunity to present their case without prejudice," he declared, a statement that resonated deeply in a courtroom that was no stranger to debates on fairness and equality. As the trial unfolded, the spotlight turned to the forensic evidence. The prosecution presented a series of meticulously collected items: a blood-stained jacket discovered near the scene, digital footprints recovered from surveillance cameras near the area, and forensic reports that indicated a rapid sequence of events. Each piece of evidence was discussed in technical detail, making it abundantly clear that the investigation had been thorough. The scientific language used was precise but interlaced with explanations that bridged the gap between technical jargon and the common understanding of justice. One of the most compelling testimonies came from a forensic expert who had worked diligently over several weeks to piece together the events of that fateful night. In her testimony, Dr. Olivia Benson, a highly regarded specialist in forensic pathology, explained how microscopic traces of DNA linked items found at the scene directly to the defendant. It was a moment of clarity that underscored the trust the public places in science when seeking the truth amidst chaos. Every word Dr. Benson uttered was weighed meticulously by the jury, and every pause was filled with anticipation as the scientific findings painted an almost incontrovertible picture of involvement. Beyond the forensic evidence, several eyewitnesses took the stand. One such witness, Mr. Samuel Reed, recounted the terrifying moments he had experienced as he sought refuge from the violence unfolding on the street. His testimony was vivid and raw, filled with emotion, yet delivered with the factual clarity of a trained observer. Mr. Reed's narrative was not only a recounting of events, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. His description of the chaos, the fear, and the eventual intervention of law enforcement added a deeply personal element to the case that resonated with many in the courtroom. As the prosecution's case grew stronger, the defense shifted its strategy. Mr. Kingsley began to dismantle the prosecution's narrative, raising questions about the chain of custody for critical pieces of evidence and suggesting that alternative explanations could account for the presence of the forensic clues at the crime scene. He introduced character witnesses who had known Richard Emerson for many years, testifying to the defendant's previously unblemished character. With calm determination, the defense argued that while the evidence pointed to involvement, it did not irrefutably prove premeditated malice or the full extent of Richard's participation in the events. During a powerful moment in cross-examination, Mr. Kingsley questioned the methods used by the forensic team, asking whether any possibility of contamination had been properly ruled out. The lines of inquiry were legal in nature, framed within the historical context of forensic reliability and the many challenges that laboratory testing can encounter. It was a moment of dramatic tension in the courtroom, a reminder that the legal system is not infallible and that the quest for absolute truth is often hampered by human error. Yet even as these questions were asked, Judge Washington maintained an air of measured control, ensuring that each point was addressed within the bounds of legal procedure. Throughout the proceedings, Judge Marcus Washington's role transcended the mere administrative duties of presiding over a trial. His presence in the courtroom was a living embodiment of the principle that justice must be blind to race, class, and prejudice. In moments when tensions flared and the weight of public expectation threatened to tip the scales, Judge Washington reiterated the ethical foundation upon which our legal system stands. In this courtroom, he would often say, "Each individual stands equal before the law, and it is our solemn duty to ensure that justice is meted out impartially." His rhetoric, direct and without hyperbole, resonated with a multi-dimensional audience, especially with those who had long felt marginalized by a system that too often appeared skewed in favor of the influential and well-connected. Judge Washington's own history as a trailblazer in a system where many doubted the ability of minorities to rise to positions of power lent his words an added weight. His commitment to fairness was not merely an ideal, it was a cornerstone of his judicial philosophy, one that he applied rigorously to every decision rendered in his courtroom. As the case progressed to more complex legal arguments, the judge was forced to make decisions on the admissibility of evidence and the relevance of certain testimonies. In one such pivotal decision, when the defense sought to exclude a critical forensic report on the grounds of procedural discrepancies, Judge Washington carefully listened to both sides before issuing a ruling that balanced technical legality with the overarching pursuit of truth. The pursuit of justice, he stated, must be underpinned by rigorous standards. At the same time, we must acknowledge the imperfections inherent in any human endeavor. Let us proceed with caution and integrity, ensuring that no stone is left unturned in the quest for an honest verdict. Over the next several weeks, the courtroom became a battleground for legal minds, each day ushering in new evidence, heated debates, and moments of profound clarity. Each session was an intricate dance of legal argumentation, where every piece of evidence was dissected under the scrutiny of cross-examinations, and every statement was analyzed in the context of applicable legal precedents. My role as a court reporter was not just to document these moments, but to interpret them for the public, bridging the gap between the sterile language of the law and the human impact of the proceedings. One particularly memorable day saw Judge Washington presiding over a contentious debate regarding the voluntariness of a confession allegedly extracted from the defendant under duress. Multiple experts were called to testify about the psychological impacts of coercion in interrogation environments, a field where science and law often intersect in delicate, almost imperceptible ways. The discussion was punctuated by thoughtful questions from both the prosecution and defense, with Judge Washington urging caution to avoid any oversimplification of complex psychological phenomena. His clarification, stating, "A confession obtained under duress cannot serve as a pillar for conviction in a civilized society," drew appreciative nods from those present and underscored his unwavering commitment to safeguarding the principles of human dignity and fairness. Outside the courtroom, the case quickly became a symbol of broader societal debates. Discussions in local cafes, town halls, and even on social media revolved around the integrity of the legal system when faced with cases that seemed to defy simple explanations. On one hand, there were those who viewed the trial as a vindication of the long overdue reforms in a system marred by racial disparities. On the other, critics raised concerns about the potential for perceived biases to undermine public confidence. In this charged environment, Judge Washington's measured conduct provided a counterbalance to the fervor of public opinion, reminding everyone that the law must remain insulated from the passions of the moment. As testimony after testimony was delivered, several key moments emerged that forever altered the narrative of the case. One such moment occurred when a previously reluctant witness, Miss Lydia Thompson, took the stand. A community activist and a local entrepreneur, Ms. Thompson had long harbored reservations about the influence of wealth and privilege in our judicial proceedings. Her testimony, delivered with poise and clarity, recounted her personal interactions with Richard Emerson prior to the tragic events. She described him as a complex individual, flawed perhaps, but also capable of redemption. Her words painted a picture that contrasted sharply with the monster the prosecution seemed determined to present. The impact of her testimony was profound. It introduced a counter-narrative that challenged preconceived notions and forced the jury to consider the multifaceted nature of human behavior. In explaining how stress, personal loss, and a history of untreated mental health issues could have converged to drive someone to commit an uncharacteristic act of violence, Ms. Thompson urged a more nuanced interpretation of the defendant's actions. Her statements, though controversial, were rooted in a broader understanding of societal factors that often contribute to criminal behavior, a perspective that echoed the principles of rehabilitation and redemption long championed by reform-minded legal scholars. Another turning point was marked by the appearance of Mr. Edward Hughes, a former law enforcement officer who had witnessed the aftermath of the crime firsthand. His testimony was a stark reminder of the inherent human cost behind every statistic and legal precedent. Mr. Hughes described the chaotic scene, the immediate response of the local police, and the profound sense of duty that had driven him to act when the call of emergency rang out. His detailed account of the security measures in place, the swift coordination among various agencies, and the subsequent investigation provided a comprehensive context that underscored the challenges of reconciling public safety with individual rights. In all these moments, Judge Washington's rulings remained firmly anchored to his belief that fairness is not a privilege, but a right bestowed upon every individual, regardless of race, socioeconomic background, or personal history. His decisions were always framed within the larger context of legal precedent, yet they carried the unmistakable imprint of a jurist who understood that behind every legal argument lay a human story deserving of empathy and respect. As the trial neared its conclusion, the courtroom atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The final rounds of closing arguments were poised to determine not only the fate of the defendant, but also shape the public's perception of the justice system itself. The prosecution, led once again by Ms. Carter, reinforced the narrative of a well-planned and executed crime that not only claimed an innocent life, but also threatened the very fabric of societal order. Her closing remarks served as a clarion call for justice, an appeal to the jury's moral duty and legal responsibility to ensure that acts of violence were met with an appropriate and unyielding response, ensuring that the community could begin to heal. In response, Mr. Kingsley's defense strategy was both impassioned and meticulously crafted. He acknowledged the undeniable weight of the evidence against Mr. Emerson, but maintained that the case, when viewed through the lens of constitutional rights and the presumption of innocence, required a thorough re-examination of every detail. His closing argument was a reminder that the very essence of justice demanded that every argument, every piece of evidence, and every character testimony be scrutinized without bias or prejudice. "We stand on the precipice," he declared, "where the line between retribution and justice must be drawn with the utmost care. It is not enough to punish, We must understand, we must rehabilitate, and we must ensure that no mistake is made in the glare of public opinion. In a memorable exchange, Judge Washington himself addressed the courtroom after the final arguments. Today, he said solemnly, we are not merely deciding a case, we are affirming the values upon which our society is built. Our duty is to uphold the law in its most unadulterated form, ensuring that every individual is afforded the same rights and protections. This is the cornerstone of freedom and democracy. The moment of truth arrived on a drizzly afternoon several days later. The atmosphere in the courtroom was one of stillness and introspection, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of testimony and legal arguments that had preceded it. The jury, having deliberated for hours that seemed to stretch into an eternity, finally returned with a verdict. The silence that fell over the courtroom was palpable as the foreman stood to announce that the defendant, Richard Emerson, was found guilty on multiple counts of homicide and aggravated assault. In that moment, as I scribbled every detail into my notepad, the profound weight of the decision was unmistakable. Judge Washington, ever the guardian of judicial impartiality, addressed his bench and the assembled public with a tone that was both measured and resolute. This ruling, he noted, does not represent a triumph of one group over another, nor does it diminish the rights of any individual. It stands as a testament to the capacity of our legal system to confront even the most grievous transgressions with a clear-eyed commitment to fairness and the unwavering rule of law. As the courtroom began to empty, the air was filled with both relief and sorrow. The community, still grappling with the tragic loss that had brought the case into such widespread attention, was now faced with the dual burdens of healing and reflection. In the days that followed, discussions erupted on local radio shows, in community centers, and across social media platforms about whether true justice had been served. But amidst the myriad of opinions, one sentiment prevailed: the need to preserve the sanctity of the legal process, regardless of the background of those involved. In the wake of the verdict, I found a quiet corner in the courthouse's public atrium to reflect on what had transpired. The case had been a crucible in which the ideals of equality, fairness, and integrity were tested to their limits. I recalled the measured words of Judge Washington, whose legacy extended far beyond this single trial. His commitment to ensuring that every person, whether African American, white, or from any other background, received a fair hearing was a reaffirmation of the dignity of our legal system. The trial had also served as a stark reminder of the ongoing need for vigilance within the justice system. Despite decades of reforms, the specter of bias and inequality continues to haunt legal proceedings. Yet in that very courtroom, the scales of justice had been deliberately balanced by a jurist who refused to let personal prejudice color the interpretation of the law. In a broader sense, the events of this trial underscored the imperative that justice must be accessible to all, regardless of individual differences. My reflections grew deeper as I considered the role of the media in shaping public opinion about justice. The narrative that unfolded in the courtroom was complex and multifaceted, a tapestry woven from forensic evidence, personal testimonies, legal arguments, and the steadfast commitment of those who believed in the power of fairness. It was a narrative that invited us all to look beyond the surface, to acknowledge the human cost of every decision, and to understand that justice is not handed down lightly. In our modern era, where the clash between diverse cultures and ideologies is more pronounced than ever, the case before us was a microcosm of larger societal struggles. It was a case that demanded we revisit the question, can the legal system rise above historical prejudices to ensure that every individual, regardless of race or background, is afforded the due process enshrined in our Constitution? The measured approach of Judge Washington provided hope, a vision of a judicial system where decisions are made based solely on facts, evidence, and the law. His courtroom was not a battleground for social or political ideologies. It was a sanctuary for truth, a place where the principles of justice were given the freedom to breathe. I could not help but feel that, in this instance, the ideals we hold dear were truly being put to the test, and for a brief shining moment were upheld. In the concluding days of this trial, as the community began the slow process of recovery, I had the opportunity to speak with several legal experts who shared their impressions of the proceedings. One noted Judge Washington's handling of this case set a new standard for judicial impartiality. His insistence that everyone is equal before the law, is a message that will resonate for years to come. Another commented on the delicate balancing act required by the jury, highlighting how the evidence, while damning in certain respects, was also a reminder of the complexities inherent in the administration of justice. From my perspective as a court reporter, I witnessed firsthand the transformation of what could have been a case marked solely by racial and political tension into a demonstration of the power of impartial lawfare. Every day in that courtroom was a lesson in the importance of procedural fairness and the intricate interplay between the human story and legal doctrine. The case of Richard Emerson will undoubtedly be studied in law schools and cited in future legal debates, not simply because of the weight of the charges, but because it challenged all of us to consider the true meaning of justice in a society that is perpetually in flux. Standing outside the courthouse on the final day of reporting, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. My role was to document events, yes, but also to ensure that every reader, from the everyday citizen to the legal professional, could grasp the significance of what had transpired. The trial was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a beacon of hope, illustrating that even in the modern era, where divisions seem more pronounced than ever, there remains a steadfast belief in the virtues of fairness, equality, and the rule of law. As I conclude my report on this landmark case, I am reminded that every individual who walks through the corridors of justice does so with a silent promise, that regardless of one's identity or past, the law remains an impartial guardian over our collective future. Judge Marcus Washington's measured yet resolute conduct will serve as a reminder for generations that the pursuit of truth is not confined by the boundaries of race or social status, but is a universal mandate that safeguards the very essence of our shared humanity. In the days and months that followed the trial, discussions about this case continued to shape public discourse. Legal academies, community centers, and even informal gatherings echoed with debates on reform, accountability, and the pressing need for a judicial system unburdened by prejudice. As I reviewed my notes and reflected on the journey that had been both arduous and enlightening, I realized that this trial was not the end, but rather the beginning of a renewed dialogue on justice in our society. With every word spoken in that courtroom, Judge Washington reaffirmed that justice is not an abstract concept, but a living, breathing ideal that must be nurtured with diligence and empathy. His courtroom, a microcosm of the larger society, symbolized the promise that our legal institutions can transcend historical inequities and offer hope to those who have long been marginalized. Even as debates about the fairness of the verdict persisted, there was an undercurrent of optimism, a belief that the future of justice lay not in the past, but in our collective will to create a system where the rights of every individual are respected. It is a reminder that, while the struggle for true equality may be long and fraught with challenges, the relentless commitment to fairness is paramount. Today marks a historic moment in the annals of our modern legal system. As I, an experienced court reporter, have been granted the opportunity to document a trial that resonates deeply with themes of justice, fairness, and equality. Over the past several weeks, the case has evolved from preliminary investigations to a full-fledged trial that has gripped public consciousness. In the opening statements of the trial, the prosecuting attorney presented a detailed account of the events leading up to the massacre. The narrative was constructed with precision, noting that the defendant had been observed in the vicinity of the crime scene on multiple occasions, and that significant forensic evidence linked him to the weapons used during the assault. Eyewitness accounts were presented as corroboration, and the prosecution argued that the defendant's actions revealed a cold, calculated intent to instill terror within an unsuspecting community. During this phase, the atmosphere in the courtroom was a blend of solemn seriousness and a vigilant quest for the truth. The defense, however, contested these claims by asserting that much of the evidence was circumstantial and that the investigation had been marred by procedural missteps. They highlighted inconsistencies in the timeline and questioned the reliability of key witnesses. Throughout the proceedings, Judge Rivers ensured that all legal standards were meticulously upheld, reminding both the prosecution and the defense that the burden of proof rested firmly on the former. His measured interjections and clarifications resonated with an audience that looked upon the legal process as a cornerstone of democratic fairness. As arguments unfolded, it became clear that the trial was not merely a contest of words, but a profound examination of the ethical and legal principles that underpin our society. Every piece of testimony, every shred of evidence, was scrutinized by an administration committed to revealing the truth in a manner that honored due process. Over the course of the trial, the dynamics within the courtroom evolved into a microcosm of the broader societal debates regarding race, justice, and the role of law enforcement. The presence of Judge Rivers, a symbol of modern judicial reform, was particularly significant amid these discussions. Observers noted that his impartial yet empathetic approach to managing the proceedings brought a sense of balance to proceedings that might otherwise have descended into partisan conflict. Outside the courtroom, opinions ranged widely, with community leaders, activists, and legal scholars offering commentary on the trial's implications for racial justice. Several op-ed pieces in major newspapers discussed the symbolic nature of a diverse bench presiding over a case that touched on deep-seated issues of race and criminal accountability. During breaks, I interviewed several legal experts who remarked that the case, while primarily about a heinous crime, served as an indicator of how far the legal system had come in addressing long-standing inequalities. They expressed cautious optimism that the trial would, in time, bolster public confidence in the institutional commitment to fairness. The measured cadence of the proceedings, interspersed with moments of fervent debate, reflected both the gravity of the charges and the high stakes involved. As the evidence continued to be presented, it became evident that the trial was meticulously orchestrated to ensure transparency and adherence to both legal and ethical standards. This process, though, underscored a fundamental belief in the possibility of reform and enduring power of reasoned judgment in the quest for justice. Throughout the trial, the personal histories of those involved were slowly revealed through witness testimonies and documentary evidence. Several community members recalled prior encounters with the defendant, describing him as a reserved individual whose behavior had rarely aroused suspicion. However, as the prosecution introduced evidence of a secretive online life and dubious financial transactions, an email chain that implied connections between the defendant and an organized network of criminals was revealed. This discovery not only intensified the charges, but also prompted a re-examination of how modern technology could be used to orchestrate sinister plots. Legal experts in the courtroom frequently referenced the importance of cyber forensics in building a compelling case, while defense attorneys argued that such evidence was easily misinterpreted without proper context. In between arguments, the intensity of the proceedings left an indelible mark on all who were present. My role as a court reporter became increasingly challenging as I sought to capture not just the legal minutiae, but also the undercurrents of human emotion, doubt, and resolve that permeated the atmosphere. Judge Rivers, ever vigilant, ensured that each piece of evidence was weighed meticulously, and his timely interventions maintained the equilibrium of the court. His judicial philosophy, deeply rooted in fairness and equality, was evident in every decision he rendered. The evolving narrative of the case thus became a testament to the transformative power of technology, the complexities of modern investigations, and the relentless pursuit of truth in an era defined by rapid change and uncertainty. The trial entered a new phase as the defense began its case with a focus on challenging the reliability of the forensic evidence. The defense attorney, Mrs. Eleanor Price, argued that the chain of custody for crucial evidence had been compromised, and that inconsistencies in the forensic reports called into question the validity of the scientific examinations presented by the prosecution. She contended that the digital footprints linking the defendant to criminal activities were circumstantial at best, and that alternative explanations could account for the anomalies in the data. Drawing on expert testimony, Ms. Price cited studies which demonstrated that errors in cyber forensic procedures were not uncommon, especially in cases involving rapidly evolving technology. Her argument was delivered with calm conviction, urging the jury to consider the possibility that misinterpretation of technical details might lead to an unjust outcome. Throughout her presentation, she maintained that every individual was entitled to the presumption of innocence and that the prosecution had failed to meet the high standard of proof required in a case of this magnitude. The defense's narrative painted a picture of a man ensnared by a confluence of unfortunate circumstances rather than a calculated criminal mastermind. As the courtroom absorbed this alternative perspective, the tension between scientific evidence and human fallibility became the focal point of debate, echoing broader societal concerns about the limits of modern technology in the service of justice. As the hours passed, witnesses took the stand, each contributing distinct pieces to the mosaic of testimony that would ultimately shape the case. One witness, a seasoned police detective with decades of experience in violent crime investigations, recounted the meticulous procedures followed during the initial crime scene examination. His testimony underscored the use of advanced forensic techniques, including digital imaging and DNA analysis, which had been pivotal in establishing the connection between the defendant and the physical evidence. Another witness, a cybersecurity expert consulted by the prosecution, explained the methods used to recover deleted data from multiple devices associated with the defendant. His detailed explanation of protocols and analytical tools provided the jury with insight into the complexity of modern digital investigations. Meanwhile, family members of the victims testified about the profound loss and suffering they had endured, their voices infused with both sorrow and resolve. The emotional impact of their account stood in stark contrast to the cold technicalities of forensic evidence, yet both aspects were treated with equal seriousness by the court. As I listened intently, it was evident that the trial was weaving together threads from diverse domains: law enforcement, digital technology, and human tragedy into a narrative that demanded both scientific acumen and deep empathy to fully understand its implications. In the midst of the proceedings, the courtroom atmosphere shifted as both sides began to engage in a more vigorous examination of the evidence. The prosecuting attorney revisited key exhibits, methodically establishing links between the defendant and the crime. Detailed timelines were presented, drawing on eyewitness sketches, security camera footage, and forensic lab reports that had been painstakingly prepared. At times, heated exchanges erupted between the legal teams over the credibility of certain pieces of evidence, with objections raised on grounds of hearsay and procedural irregularities. Judge Rivers, with his signature calm demeanor, intervened to enforce strict adherence to courtroom protocols, ensuring that each objection was considered carefully and that the trial proceeded without unnecessary disruption. In one memorable moment, he summoned both legal teams for a brief recess in order to clarify issues surrounding the admissibility of digital evidence. His intervention was widely regarded as a masterful display of judicial control, one that reinforced the principle that every participant in the legal process was bound by the same standards of accountability. The interplay of arguments and counter-arguments during this phase not only highlighted the complexity of the case, but also underscored the essential role of a fair and balanced adjudication in maintaining public trust in the justice system. As the trial advanced into its later stages, closing arguments began to take form, and the courtroom became an arena for impassioned appeals to both logic and moral conscience. The prosecution's final statement was a powerful synthesis of the evidence, weaving together disparate strands into a coherent narrative of premeditated violation of the law. With rhetorical precision, the lead prosecutor recounted how each element of the case, from digital footprints and forensic data to eyewitness testimonies, pointed inexorably to the defendant's guilt. He argued that despite any claims of circumstantial doubt, the cumulative weight of the evidence left no room for alternative interpretations. In contrast, the defense's closing remarks emphasized the importance of uncertainty and the need for concrete proof beyond any reasonable doubt. Mrs. Price cautioned the jury against the perils of letting emotional narratives overshadow empirical evidence, urging them to consider the possibility of technical errors and investigative oversights. Her words resonated with a commitment to safeguarding individual rights and ensuring that no person should be condemned without irrefutable proof. The tenor of these final arguments encapsulated the enduring tension between the human elements of tragedy and the rigorous demands of legal standards, leaving an indelible impression on all in attendance as they contemplated the profound responsibilities entrusted to the jury. The deliberation process following the closing arguments was a test of patience, discernment, and the resilience of the legal system. In a private room adjacent to the courtroom, the jury convened to deliberate, their task burdened by the weight of lives affected and the complexities inherent in modern forensic evidence. I was granted a rare opportunity to observe the somber mood as jurors engaged in careful discussions, weighing each piece of evidence and testimony against the backdrop of their own understanding of justice. Hours turned into what felt like an interminable stretch as the jurors scrutinized inconsistencies, recalibrated timelines, and re-examined the technical data presented during the trial. Their deliberations were marked by moments of quiet reflection interspersed with fervent debate, a process that underscored the serious responsibility they bore. Outside, the public waited anxiously for a resolution that promised to deliver closure to a community traumatized by violence. The detailed arguments, the interplay of advanced forensic science, and the humanity woven into every testimony had converged to form a trial narrative that was as intricate as it was consequential. In that deliberation room, the principles of fairness and equality were not merely abstract ideals, but practical imperatives that would determine the fate of a man accused of egregious crimes. After an extended period of careful consideration, the jury finally reached a verdict, and the moment of judgment arrived with a gravity that seemed to suspend time itself. In a packed courtroom, every eye was fixed on the foreperson as she read the decision, her voice steady and measured. The verdict, affirming the guilt of the defendant on multiple charges, was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow. For the families of the victims, it marked a step toward closure, while for others, it raised questions about the broader implications for criminal justice and the role of digital evidence in modern prosecutions. As the jurors recounted their deliberative process in hushed tones afterward, it was evident that their decision had been reached through rigorous scrutiny and a deep commitment to the principles of justice. Judge Rivers addressed the assembly with a measured tone, emphasizing that the trial had been conducted with the highest standards of legal integrity. His remarks reiterated the judiciary's commitment to fairness, equality, and the protection of individual rights, principles that would continue to guide the system in an era of rapid technological change. In that defining moment, the courtroom transformed into a symbol of collective resolve, where the pursuit of truth took precedence over personal bias and where every vote cast in favor of justice reinforced the foundations of a democratic society. In the aftermath of the verdict, the public response was both immediate and intense, as media outlets, legal analysts, and community leaders weighed in on the outcome. News headlines heralded the trial as a watershed moment, a case that transcended its immediate circumstances to challenge long-standing perceptions about the intersection of technology, race, and law. I found myself speaking to several colleagues and experts who felt that the trial had set a new benchmark for how digital evidence should be integrated into criminal proceedings. Social media buzzed with discussions about the role of a diverse judiciary, with many lauding Judge Rivers for his balanced approach and unwavering dedication to justice. Amid the applause and criticism, public forums and town hall meetings began to organize around the themes emerging from the courtroom. Debates arose regarding the need for reforms in forensic science protocols and improvements in transparency during criminal investigations. Critics of the verdict argued for a review of the technical methodologies employed in the digital aspects of the case, while supporters maintained that the outcome was a testament to the system's ability to evolve and uphold the rule of law. In communities still reeling from the impacts of the crime, the verdict offered both a sense of vindication and the promise of continued vigilance in the face of modern challenges to justice. In the days following the trial, I continued to cover the unfolding story, traveling to various community centers and speaking with activists who were mobilizing to address broader issues of legal reform. Many expressed hope that the case would serve as a catalyst for substantive changes in how evidence, particularly digital evidence, is handled in the courtroom. Meetings were convened with local representatives to discuss measures that could enhance both the efficiency and the transparency of forensic investigations. At these gatherings, the narrative of the trial was recounted in myriad forms, some focusing on the technical details of the evidence, others on the broader implications for civil rights and racial equality. It became clear that while the verdict provided a measure of justice for those directly affected by the crime, it also sparked a broader dialogue about the responsibilities of law enforcement and the judiciary in a society where technology plays an ever more critical role. The discussions emphasized community involvement, the need for ongoing education about legal rights, and the importance of holding institutions accountable. This phase of reflection and action revealed a collective desire to not only acknowledge the progress that had been made, but also to rigorously pursue further reforms in the interest of fairness, transparency, and enduring democratic values. Within the precincts of legal academia, the trial quickly became a subject of in-depth analysis and debate. Scholars and law professors from renowned institutions gathered in seminars and conferences to dissect the various dimensions of the case, from the reliability of cyber forensic evidence to the evolving role of race in judicial proceedings. Highly detailed papers and commentaries were published, each offering nuanced perspectives on how the trial had both challenged traditional legal paradigms and reinforced core values of justice and equality. One recurring theme in these discussions was the balance that must be maintained between technological advancements and the preservation of individual rights. Many argued that while digital evidence held immense potential for solving crimes, it also demanded rigorous oversight to prevent misuse and ensure that its interpretation did not inadvertently perpetuate biases. Professor Adrian Cole, an expert in forensic law, was frequently cited for his insights on the limitations of current methodologies and the importance of ongoing research in this area. His lectures emphasized that the trial was not merely an isolated incident, but part of a broader evolution in legal processes, one that required both innovation and prudent safeguards. As the academic community continued its debates, it became evident that the trial would leave a lasting impact on legal education, influencing future generations of lawyers and judges to embrace both technological progress and unwavering adherence to the principles of fairness and equality. In the weeks that followed the verdict, the legal community and the public at large began to reflect on the lessons learned from this landmark case. There was a strong consensus that the trial served as a stark reminder of the inherent complexities of administering justice in a digital age. At a roundtable discussion attended by jurists, forensic experts, and policymakers, the conversation centered on the need to update legal protocols to keep pace with rapidly evolving technology. Discussions touched on everything from standardized procedures for digital evidence collection to enhanced training for law enforcement officials in cyber forensics. Many panelists highlighted the challenges of ensuring that technological tools were neither over-relied upon nor dismissed outright, advocating instead for a balanced approach where empirical data was weighed against the testimony of witnesses and the insights of experienced investigators. The dialogue also extended to issues of racial representation within the justice system, with several participants underscoring how the presence of judges like Rivers provided an inspiring model for the future. His commitment to fairness and impartiality was seen as a reminder that progress in the legal field requires not only technical competence, but also a deep respect for the fundamental human values that underpin democratic society. This reflective period signaled a turning point, inspiring calls for reform that would shape legal practices for years to come. As the city slowly returned to its routine after the intense media coverage of the trial, I found myself musing over the broader implications of what had transpired within those August courtroom walls. The case, with all its technological intricacies and human dramas, had become a mirror reflecting society's perennial quest for justice and truth. In quiet moments, I conversed with citizens who expressed both pride in the resilience of the legal system and concern over the challenges that lay ahead. Community leaders stressed the importance of transparency and accountability, urging local authorities to adopt new measures that would reinforce public trust. Meanwhile, cultural commentators debated the role of technology in modern criminal investigations, questioning whether the digital evidence presented in court might one day be susceptible to manipulation or misinterpretation. Across town, myriad discussions unfolded in coffee shops, public libraries, and social media platforms, each echoing the sentiment that the pursuit of justice was as much a communal endeavor as it was the responsibility of the judiciary. The narrative of the trial, underscored by the exemplary performance of Judge Rivers and the measured arguments of both legal teams, stood as a testament to a society striving to reconcile tradition with progress, idealism with realism, and inevitably a commitment to upholding the rights and dignity of every individual under the law. In the following months, the trial's verdict continued to reverberate throughout the community and influence policy discussions at multiple levels of government. Lawmakers cited elements of the case in debates over new legislation aimed at improving forensic science protocols and strengthening safeguards against technological errors in criminal investigations. Public forums and legislative sessions alike became platforms for spirited discussions on the intersection of technology and justice, with experts advocating for more rigorous standards and improved training in cyber forensics. Meanwhile, advocacy groups representing victims' rights and civil liberties organized campaigns calling for comprehensive reviews of evidence handling procedures and increased transparency in how digital data is used in courtrooms. Judge Rivers emerged as a respected figure, not only for his role in the trial, but also for his ongoing commentary on the need for systemic reform. His measured insights into the potential pitfalls and promises of digital evidence were widely circulated, further cementing his status as a modern arbiter of justice. For me, as a court reporter chronicling these unfolding developments, it was both an honor and a profound responsibility to capture the continuing dialogue. The trial had not only resolved a harrowing case, but it had also sparked a transformative conversation that promised to redefine legal practices in an era marked by rapid technological innovation and evolving societal values. Simultaneously, in a series of interviews with former participants of the trial, including jurors, attorneys, and witnesses, an intricate portrait of the courtroom experience emerged. Many jurors recalled the intense deliberations with a blend of solemnity and conviction, noting that the trial challenged their preconceptions about the interplay between law, technology, and human fallibility. Defense attorneys expressed relief that the deliberative process had been conducted fairly, yet remained circumspect about the long-term ramifications of relying heavily on digital evidence in complex cases. Prosecutors, for their part, maintained that the strength of their case lay in the convergence of multiple lines of evidence, a testament to the thoroughness of the investigation. Amid these reflections, a recurring theme was the recognition of the trial as a learning experience for all involved, a moment when the ideals of due process and equitable justice were tested against the backdrop of modern challenges. The insights gathered from these interviews underscored the multifaceted nature of the judicial process, revealing a spectrum of emotions ranging from hope and determination to concern and resolve. This shared experience not only enriched public understanding of the case, but also laid the groundwork for ongoing discussions about the evolution of the legal system in the digital age. As reports of the trial's impact continued to surge, communities across the nation began to embrace a renewed sense of vigilance and engagement with the judicial process. Grassroots organizations organized informational seminars and public debates, aiming to educate citizens on their legal rights and the intricacies of modern courtroom procedures. In one such seminar, a panel comprising legal experts, technology specialists, and community advocates dissected the trial's proceedings and its broader implications for civil liberties. Attendees were encouraged to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and consider the delicate balance between technological advancements and the protection of individual freedoms. Local media outlets amplified these discussions by broadcasting public forums and publishing detailed analyses of the procedures observed during the trial. As a direct consequence, a more informed and active public emerged, dedicated to ensuring that future judicial processes would be as transparent, accountable, and inclusive as possible. This period of civic engagement, sparked by the case, underscored the enduring principle that the legal system is fundamentally a public trust. In every debate, every public commentary, there was a collective yearning not only for justice in a single case, but for the continual improvement of a system designed to serve all members of society equitably. Now, as I reflect on the monumental trial and its ripple effects across the legal, technological, and social landscapes, I am reminded of the inherent strength of a justice system that strives for fairness and equality. The trial, presided over by the exemplary Judge Rivers, was far more than an adjudication of guilt or innocence. It was a powerful affirmation of democratic principles in a time when the challenges of modernity required both innovation and deep-rooted commitment to fairness. In recounting the events that unfolded within the stately courtroom, I have attempted to capture not merely the procedural intricacies, but also the human stories interwoven into the fabric of the trial. From the harrowing testimonies of grief-stricken families to the meticulous analysis of digital evidence, every element contributed to a narrative that celebrated the possibility of reform and the promise of a more just society. As the community continues to navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world, the lessons gleaned from this case will endure, inspiring future generations to champion truth, uphold equality, and never waver in the pursuit of justice. In the end, the trial reaffirms that even in the face of profound challenges, as a court reporter with over 2 decades of experience, I have witnessed my share of landmark cases, each weaving its own narrative into the larger tapestry of our legal system. Today, I bring you a detailed account of a case that not only broke precedent for its legal complexities, but more importantly, challenged and ultimately reaffirmed the timeless principles of fairness and equality in our modern judicial system. The case on the docket was one of the most serious criminal matters in recent memory. I had followed Judge Ellington's career for many years. Before ascending to the bench, he had practiced law with passion and brilliance, often taking on cases that gave voice to the silenced and brought justice to the marginalized. His reputation for extreme fairness resonated throughout the community and in legal circles alike. With his signature calm demeanor and precise legal language, he became an emblem of what modern judiciary should represent, especially in an era where societal divisions sometimes run deeper than the law's cast-iron principles. The case itself, officially titled State versus Anderson, involved a series of events that spanned several months. The defendant, Mr. Jonathan Anderson, was implicated in a series of incidents that escalated from verbal altercations into violent outbursts, ultimately culminating in a severe assault that left his victim, a prominent community leader, critically injured. Given the gravity of the charges, the trial was designated as high profile, with significant media attention. Both the prosecution and defense presented starkly contrasting narratives, each striving to persuade the jury with compelling evidence and meticulously crafted legal arguments. As I settled into my seat in the packed courtroom, I could feel the weight of expectation in the air. The opening statements began with the prosecutor's office outlining a narrative that painted Mr. Anderson as a remorseless aggressor who sought to intimidate and terrorize those who dared to stand against him. The prosecuting attorney, a seasoned litigator known for her articulate and measured rhetoric, spoke of a reckless disregard for human life, a characteristic she argued resonated with the defendant's chosen course of action on that fateful day. Across the courtroom, the defendant's counsel offered a markedly different perspective, emphasizing mitigating circumstances and challenging the reliability of certain key pieces of evidence. Their arguments were underscored by a robust presentation of forensic expert testimony, which, although technical and often complex, was carefully elucidated so that the layperson could appreciate its implications. Both legal teams employed the precision required by statutory and case law, each referencing prior cases and legal precedents to bolster their positions. Judge Ellington, sitting at the bench, conducted the proceedings with a measured gravity. It was clear that he was not simply a conduit for the law, but rather a guardian of its spirit. His rulings on evidence were explained in clear formal language that left little room for ambiguity, yet were accessible enough for the general public to grasp the nuances involved. In his instructions to the jury, he impressed upon them the essential principle that guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and that every defendant, regardless of his background, was entitled to the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise. During a particularly memorable day of testimony, forensic evidence took center stage. A forensic expert from the state lab testified about the DNA evidence collected at the scene, as well as the ballistic and digital evidence that traced Mr. Anderson's movements in the hours leading up to and following the crime. The expert was careful and systematic in his presentation, ensuring that the complex scientific data was broken down into essential facts. His testimony was replete with legal jargon. Terms like chain of custody, corroboration, and probative value were interwoven with everyday language to make the material comprehensible. Judge Ellington allowed for clarifications, knowing well that the reliability of forensic science hinged on the jurors' understanding of these vital terms. Outside the courtroom, the public debate was heated. Yet despite the polarization in many social spheres, Judge Ellington's courtroom was a sanctuary where the rule of law reigned supreme. His reputation for fairness meant that both sides were given equal footing in their presentations, and his ability to distill legal doctrine into accessible insights earned him respect across diverse segments of society. I recall a moment on a mid-trial break when I had the opportunity to speak briefly with Judge Ellington. His presence was both commanding and reassuring. In these halls, he remarked, our responsibility extends beyond the immediate parties of any case. We are the stewards of a trust, a belief in the fundamental equality of every person under the law. It is our duty to ensure that justice, in its purest form, is meted out impartially and with respect for all. As the trial resumed, the defense introduced its own set of witness testimonies, character witnesses, community members, and even expert mental health professionals who tried to contextualize Mr. Anderson's actions in a framework that included his personal history and moments of vulnerability. One testimony in particular struck a chord with me. A longtime neighbor recounted how Mr. Anderson, despite his alleged actions, had once been known in the community for his willingness to lend a helping hand. This account did not absolve him of his alleged crimes, but it did raise poignant questions about the multifaceted nature of human behavior and the influence of environment on individual choices. The testimony from both sides was weighed meticulously by the jury, with each piece of evidence scrutinized under the lens of legal sanity and moral responsibility. I documented each day's proceedings with an acute awareness of the significance of every detail. The dynamic between the defense and prosecutorial teams was emblematic of a vibrant democracy in motion, a system in which every argument, every piece of evidence, and every legal precedent was contested in the spirit of truth-seeking. Although the debates in the courtroom were fierce, what struck me most was the quiet dignity of the institution itself. The modern courtroom, with its state-of-the-art digital displays and secure transmission networks, stood as a monument to the enduring principles of justice, even as it adapted to the contours of our current age. Over the course of a 2-week trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom morphed from one of high tension to a collective quest for an equitable resolution. The long hours, cross-examinations, recesses, and even the intermittent silences all contributed to a narrative that was as much about the legal specifics as it was about the broader societal dialogue on fairness. The trial hinted at an evolving legal paradigm, one that acknowledged the complexities of human experience even while upholding a steadfast commitment to legal objectivity. On the final day, Judge Ellington delivered his instructions to the jury with an eloquence that combined legal precision with a palpable urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating clearly within the cavernous courtroom, "we stand at a juncture where the decisions you make will echo far beyond the confines of these walls. It is not merely a verdict you render, but an affirmation of the absolute right of every individual to be judged solely on the facts presented and without prejudice. In our system of law, there is no room for discrimination or bias, only the relentless pursuit of truth." As the jury began their deliberations, I found myself reflecting on the broader implications of the case. The narrative was not simply about the crime and its alleged perpetrator. It was about the face of modern justice, how our institutions and the individuals within them strive to uphold a collective promise of fairness, even against the pressures of societal divisions. Judge Ellington's demeanor, marked by calm authority and unwavering commitment to equality, served as an inspiring reminder that justice is a shared ideal, transcending race, class, or historical grudges. When the jury finally returned with their decision, the courtroom held its breath. The verdict was a measured, carefully reasoned balance between accountability and mitigation. While Mr. Anderson was found guilty on several counts, the jury's decision to impose a sentence that included both punitive measures and provisions for psychological rehabilitation underscored an acknowledgement of the complexity underlying criminal behavior. The sentence read as a statement of both retribution and a commitment to restorative justice. The judge took his moment to address both the defendant and the audience. "This court's decision," Judge Ellington intoned solemnly, "is not an endorsement of any form of prejudice. It is a testament to our system, which endeavors to balance the scales of justice by considering every facet of the case. Legal decisions are not declarations of hostility. Rather, they are affirmations of the standard that every citizen deserves a fair and impartial examination of the facts before the law." The aftermath of the verdict was a mixture of relief and contemplation among those present. Observers noted that despite the emotional charge of the case, the proceedings had been conducted with a clarity and respect for legal doctrine that reinforced the public's trust in its institutions. I spent the following days capturing interviews with legal experts, community leaders, and even members of the jury, all of whom expressed admiration for the balanced and deliberate manner in which Judge Ellington presided over the trial. A local law professor remarked, "This case has set a precedent on multiple levels. Not only was it a rigorous exercise in applying statutory law to a complex human narrative, but it also served as a reminder that fairness does not bend in the face of politics or personal characteristics, be they of the accused, the accuser, or even the judge. For me as a reporter, the real story lay in the subtle interplay of integrity, legal obligation, and human compassion. The case of State versus Anderson will likely be dissected in legal journals and cited in future case law discussions. Yet its enduring legacy may well be found in those quiet moments in the courtroom when Judge Ellington's measured voice reminded everyone that justice is a living, breathing principle, one that must be nurtured and defended with unwavering commitment. The courtroom itself served as a repository of shared history, where every participant, from the novice clerk to the seasoned judge, contributed to the ongoing narrative of society's commitment to justice. The courtroom itself was a repository of shared history, a place where every participant, from the novice clerk to the seasoned judge, contributed to the ongoing narrative of society's commitment to justice. It was here, under the watchful eye of Judge Ellington, that the ideals of equality were not mere abstractions, but were actively practiced. His judicious balancing of legal precedents, combined with an earnest recognition of the human dimensions of every case, underscored a rare but vital truth, that the law, at its best, is an instrument of healing. I spent long hours after the trial interviewing jurors who spoke about the gravity of their responsibilities. That comment stayed with me as I prepared my final report. It became a guiding principle in my own reflection on the case. In an era fraught with skepticism about fairness and accusations of systemic bias, the performance of Judge Ellington and the dedication of every participant in the trial served as a reaffirmation that the law, when properly administered, is the ultimate guarantor of equality. The modern era has presented many challenges to old institutions, challenges that call for a reinvigorated commitment to principles that have long served as the backbone of jurisprudence. From my perspective as a court reporter, witnessing the trial of State versus Anderson was like watching history in the making. It was a vivid demonstration that while technology and modern societal dynamics might change the methods and mediums of legal proceedings, the core ethical imperatives remain constant. I recall a particularly impactful moment toward the end of the trial when a defense expert, specializing in behavioral psychology, addressed the presiding judge. His voice was imbued with both professional confidence and a sense of human empathy. "Your Honor," he began, "it is imperative that we recognize even the most grievous of offenses can be symptomatic of deeper societal neglect. In sentencing, we should not only focus on retribution, but also on rehabilitation. This is the way we honor the principle of second chances inherent in our justice system." Judge Ellington's response, both measured and profound, resonated with everyone present. "While the law must always be applied with strict adherence to its principles," he said, "it must also be administered with an awareness of the broader human context. We do not operate in isolation of our society, but as integral, active participants in its evolution." That moment underscored a pivotal lesson for everyone in the courtroom. Justice is not solely about punishment. It is equally about transformation, about giving every individual the opportunity to improve and contribute positively to society, regardless of their past transgressions. In that courtroom, amidst endless legal jargon and meticulous procedural analyses, there was also a genuine focus on the human capacity for redemption. As the trial ended and the corridors of the courthouse began to empty, I couldn't help but reflect on the profound impact such cases have on our collective understanding of fairness. The legacy of Judge Ellington's tenure on the bench is, in large part, defined by cases like this, a melding of the rigid frameworks of legal norms and the fluid, sometimes messy, realities of human existence. Over the following weeks, debates and discussions proliferated in both legal circles and everyday conversations. Many remarked that the verdict, while legally sound, was unusual in its balanced approach to sentencing, a nod to the evolving idea that the punitive measures of the past need not be an irreversible fate, but rather a catalyst for structured rehabilitation. In numerous interviews for my final report, I encountered a recurring theme. The pursuit of justice in this trial was emblematic of a broader societal shift. A young attorney fresh from law school expressed optimism. "Every day we see our legal system adapting," she explained. "There is a newfound recognition that justice and fairness demand that the law be applied without prejudice to race, gender, or socioeconomic background." Judge Ellington embodies this ideal by administering each case as a testament to the shared values of our community. The embodiment of those values could not have been more evident than in the courtroom's final moments. Judge Ellington's parting remarks, delivered with solemn dignity, invoked historical references to the struggles for civil rights, alongside a forward-looking vision for an inclusive and equitable society. "Today," he declared, "we have not only adjudicated a matter of criminal conduct, but have also recommitted ourselves to the unwavering truth that the law exists to serve and protect every individual. Our legal system remains a sanctuary free of bias, a place where fairness prevails even in the face of adversity. I left the courthouse that day with a heart full of hope for the future. The trial of State versus Anderson would undoubtedly be dissected and discussed by scholars and critics alike. But for me, it was a reaffirmation of my belief in the legal system's capacity for self-correction and humane transformation. In an age where public trust in institutions is often challenged by divisive rhetoric, the events in that courtroom had provided a powerful counter-narrative, one that celebrated equity, rigor, and above all, a resolute commitment to justice. As my final article on this case went to print, I was left with a profound appreciation for the delicate balance maintained within our legal system. As I reflect on the entirety of this case from my vantage point as a chronicler of court proceedings, the narrative of State versus Anderson transcends the particulars of a single trial. In the days following the verdict, public sentiment continued to evolve. Legal critics lauded the decision for its balanced approach, and community activists saw it as a vindication of their calls for reform. Interviews with various stakeholders revealed a consensus that justice can only be achieved when the intricate interplay of legal precision and human empathy is allowed to flourish. Whether one supported the prosecution or the defense, no one could deny the integrity with which Judge Ellington conducted the proceedings. He was the embodiment of what modern jurisprudence should strive to achieve, a legal process that transcends the boundaries of color, background, and preconceived notions. As my final article on this case went to print, I was left with a profound appreciation for the delicate balance maintained within our legal system, one that ensures justice is served while safeguarding fundamental human rights. The reflections shared by those who participated, be it through legal argumentation, expert testimony, or jury deliberation, presented a multifaceted portrait of justice in a modern society. They illustrated that while the law can be unyielding in its demands for evidence and adherence to procedure, it also has the remarkable capability to adapt and forgive. It is a system built not on the rigid dogmas of yesteryear, but on an evolving understanding of human fallibility and the enduring promise of redemption. Today, as I compile these recollections, I want to emphasize that the true triumph in State versus Anderson was not simply the delivery of a verdict, but rather a reaffirmation of our judicial commitment to treating every individual with the respect and impartiality demanded by the law. In closing, the narrative of this case is not confined to the walls of a courtroom. It extends to every corner of our society where the aspirations for equality and rule of law persist. Judge Marcus Ellington's tenure on the bench, as exemplified in this trial, offers a guiding light for all who seek a legal system that sees beyond the superficial divides of race, background, or circumstance. It is a beacon for policymakers, legal professionals, and citizens who believe fervently in the promise of justice. As I sign off on this account, I remain grateful for the opportunity to have witnessed a trial that truly embodied the spirit of fairness and objectivity, illustrating that when the law is administered with both precision and empathy, the legacy of State versus Anderson will resonate throughout legal history, not merely as a case of criminal prosecution, but as a profound affirmation of the belief that our justice system can adapt and thrive amidst change. The modern era presents us with numerous challenges, yet each trial such as this reminds us that the law can evolve while retaining its core mission to safeguard human dignity and ensure that every individual is treated equally in the eyes of justice. It is a testament to the fact that when justice is pursued with an unwavering commitment to truth and fairness, the entire fabric of society is strengthened. This case, with its intricate interplay of forensic science, legal expertise, and human emotion, will continue to serve as a reference point for future generations of legal practitioners and citizens alike. It is my sincere hope that the lessons learned within this courtroom will inspire more profound introspection and drive substantive progress toward a society where equality before the law is not merely an ideal, but a daily reality. In the end, the story of Judge Ellington and the trial of State versus Anderson is a reminder of the timeless nature of justice. It illustrates that while human imperfection may persist, our collective commitment to the principles of fairness, accountability, and redemption can rise above it all. As a witness to this historic moment, I remain convinced that the enduring legacy of this trial will be its affirmation of the fundamental truth that the law's true strength lies in its impartiality and unwavering resolve to protect every citizen. I leave you with these thoughts as a final reflection on a case that will undoubtedly be remembered as a turning point, a moment when the scales of justice were balanced not by force or prejudice, but by the genuine pursuit of truth through a modern and fair legal process. In retrospect, the trial was a vivid reminder that while we may come from different backgrounds, the quest for justice binds us all. And it is through this shared journey, navigating complexities, confronting harsh realities, and ultimately reaffirming our common humanity, that we uphold the enduring promise that every individual is equal under the law. As I conclude this narrative, the echoes of Judge Ellington's measured words, the thoroughness of the legal arguments, and the reflective silence of the jury deliberations continue to resonate within me. The trial of State vs. Anderson is not just a chronicle of events, but a beacon for all who believe that in our legal system, fairness and equality are more than aspirations. They are the pillars upon which our society is built. May the lessons of this case inspire future generations to embrace a legal system that is as compassionate as it is just, as rigorous as it is fair, and as inclusive as the enduring spirit of equality itself.